Hello everyone, my name is Fabio Fasoli and I'm going to talk about this project I'm doing with Marco. So we have a very long title, but the project is about enhancing inclusion for LGBTQI+ researchers in STEM and energy research. So we have three main aims. I'm going to talk about each of them now, but basically they're all meant to give a bit of information around inclusion and hopefully lead to some solutions. So the first objective is to aim to map and review the best practices that already exist in higher education when it comes to LGBTQI+ people in reference to inclusion, retention, and promotion. So the first task that we have been doing is basically mapping what is available on websites of different universities. So we have looked at 140 universities across the UK just to see what kind of content is there, whether there is a mention of LGBTQI+ researchers. For example, if there is LGBT network and there is a person that can be contacted and so on and so forth. And also there is any mention about specific practices on the websites. That is going to be paired with a survey that we're going to send out to all universities, trying to get a bit more sense of what are practices that might not be mentioned on the websites, but actually are implemented and used across different institutions. And we're also going to do some interviews with EDI experts because we know that when we have practices, there is also a journey to implement those practices, and we want to understand whether there were some challenges and how people have overcome those challenges to implement the practices. So that will be the starting point for one of our output as a digital toolkit on good practices in the sector. The second aim is to bring in the perspective of LGBTQI+ researchers on these topics. So we know already quite a bit on experiences of barriers and that people have, but we want to understand what is the perception of LGBTQI+ people on the practices that different institutions are implementing to understand whether they're perceived as effective or not, and if they're not effective, what can be done to improve them. I forgot to mention that in the interviews we plan to run in the first objective or the first part of the project, we want to understand what are the areas of improvements that EDI practitioners think are needed in relation to different practices. So we're going to investigate this by running a focus groups that hopefully will lead us to have a conceptual framework on perception of those practices when it comes from LGBTQI+ individuals. And the final one is the co-creation of solutions. So we will bring into the discussion some of the practices that we have found in the first phase of the project, then that we have discussed with the LGBTQI people, and we're going to share with LGBTQI people and EDI practitioners those practices and see whether we can improve them and what together we can understand has an improvement, because that can vary. So we're going to run a workshop, and that will lead to a policy brief with some actionable recommendations that hopefully are going to be used by different institutions to improve the practices that are in place, or maybe use new practices that are not in place. And I've been very quick.